each time there's a new newsreel screening at the Sun Theatre, when it's a community interest story, I'm going to play the newsreel and have a talk about that. So this newsreel, which has been showing on screen for a couple of weeks now, is about the Westgate Tunnel works and the smokestacks that have been built, and a feeling that really more could be done to eliminate the fumes that come from all of the trucks and cars that travel in the West. And we have Martin Wurt, the head of MTAG, on the line. Hi, Martin.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for this opportunity to chat this afternoon.
Oh, no, thank you. It's this first came to my attention, let me think. It was, I read an article in the West Sider, the fantastic monthly newspaper that comes out in the West, and I remember reaching out to you straight away and saying, hey, tell me more, and what can we do to help? And it did feel, despite all of the work you've done, it just felt like a bit more attention needed to be pushed towards this. And then you, and the filming of the newsreel coincided with you basically saying, well, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be having a community rally. And that was really well picked up by the media, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Look, just since you've come on board with the newsreel, we've just been watching the number of people who sign our petition just going up and up every day. So it's been amazing to get that spotlight on our campaign. We often get local media, things like the West Sider and the Star Weekly are really supportive, but something like the newsreel is something, it's showing, I don't know how many times a day for over a month at the Sun. It's a great opportunity for us to get our message out.
Oh, well, look, thanks for that. It's look, it would be 50 times a day, and we've been making those newsreels for over 20 years now, and I must say, often they're quite light and fluffy. Generally, we're looking for positive stories to tell, but every now and again something comes along and we think we've got to help with this. Now, tell us where you're up to now. Why don't you just fill us in a bit with what's happening? I saw there was an EPA. I tried to get there last night. I was running late and couldn't on my way to town, but the EPA had an information session yesterday. How did that go?
Correct, yeah. They had what they called an open house drop-in at the Braybrook Community Centre. And that was really interesting because, they haven't been doing any community consultation whatsoever over the vent stacks. So we think this is, it's really a direct result of the campaigning that we're doing and the incredible media and also the newsreel, of course, that is really getting our message out there. So I think they got to the point where they can't really ignore us any longer. Last night, though, it was kind of disappointing, to be perfectly honest. I mean, just physically, the space was this empty, echoey community hall, and the EPA kind of had these little tables set up, and the idea was you'd go to one table, you'd talk to somebody there. If they couldn't answer the questions you had, they'd direct you to the table that was kind of more appropriate. But you could barely hear anything that anybody was saying. There wasn't a chair in the room, so, you're standing for an hour and a half as you kind of navigate between these tables. And, the EPA staff on one side of the table, they couldn't even hear themselves a couple of times where they had to say, hang on, let me get closer, I can't hear you. So being across the table, we could barely hear them. So what passes for community consultation these days, it's so disappointing, to be perfectly honest. I mean, that's just the space before I even get onto I suppose, what we're actually being told.
So tell me, at that event, I mean, maybe for those who aren't familiar with it, maybe just explain your general premise. Let's go right back to the start. The tunnel's being built. There are smokestacks at either end that will suck all of the fumes out. Tell us what it is you're asking for.
Correct. I'm going to go back to even before the vent stack. So the city of Maribyrnong, unfortunately, sits between the Port of Melbourne and warehouses further out west. So that means we get most of the containers coming into the Port of Melbourne are coming through our suburbs. And when they're coming through our suburbs, they're on the back of trucks using residential streets. Like a lot of Melbourne thinks of, a major freight route as being a freeway, a divided road, at least 3 or 4 lanes, for example. These are narrow residential streets that are often one lane in each direction. So for the last 25 years, I've been campaigning to try and get less trucks on residential streets. So back in 2015, the government announced they were going to build this Westgate Tunnel project and finally get trucks off our streets. So that was incredibly welcome. They went through this massive inquiry process, which was called an EES, an Environmental Effects Statement. That took place in 2017. So that was looking at what the potential impacts were going to be of this Westgate Tunnel project. And one of the things that we raised was we need filtration on those vent stacks. So there's a vent stack either end of the tunnels, and that's where all the pollution that builds up inside the tunnel gets forced up. It's basically a big chimney. It gets forced up this chimney through fans. And around the world, there's about 15 countries who put filtration on their vent stacks in areas of high concentrations of pollution already, inner urban areas like the city of Maribyrnong. So that EES process back in 2017, they had all sorts of health professionals, health experts presenting to that. And the recommendation of that inquiry, the government's own inquiry, was filtration from day one. But unfortunately, the good old EPA, the government department that's set up to actually protect the environment, came out and said, well, you know what, it's not really necessary. Our position is, let's design the vent stacks so that if pollution gets to a certain level later on, we can put filtration in. And that was the position that the government actually accepted. So they kind of just ignored all the expert evidence from health experts and went with the EPA. So the Westgate Tunnel project is under construction at the moment. The vent stacks themselves, if anybody's seen them, there's the southern vent stack, which is up around Altona North, South Kingsville. It's next to the old Bradmill site where I think there's 5,000 new houses being built at the moment. And the other one is down by Yarraville Gardens. So we've been working with Environmental Justice Australia, a bunch of lawyers who work on environmental issues, and they've identified that the last kind of hurdle that Transurban needs to get this tunnel operating is they need operating licence for the vent stacks. So we are trying to pressure the EPA to actually hold a conference of interested persons to consider new evidence that's come to light since 2017. And, in the years since then, we know a lot more about the health impacts of diesel emissions. We also know that the city of Maribyrnong has some of the highest hospital admission rates for illnesses that are associated.
What you've told me this, but on it, what was the percentage higher that Maribyrnong was?
So children in the city of Maribyrnong, aged between 0 and 16, are admitted to hospital at 171% above the Australian averages.
Wow.
It's incredible. Our own council here, the city of Maribyrnong, they declared a health emergency in 2023 because of the impacts of air and noise pollution from trucks. So this tunnel is being built. We've been promised we're going to get truck bans on all the kind of east-west roads. So it's Black Shores Road, Hudson's Road, Francis Street, Somerville Road, Buckley Street and Moore Street.
And so to be fair, that's a massive win. Like let's just be fair on that one. So you've spent 25 years campaigning to get trucks off the road, and the government has actually delivered on that for you, haven't they?
Oh, it's a massive win. It's taken a long time to get here, but that will be incredible. And last year through our campaigning, the government has committed, I think it's $10.5 million to put electronic monitoring on those roads that are getting the 20.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did see that announced.
Yeah, so that's a really big win as well. But we just need that filtration, Michael. Like, we're going to get the trucks off our streets, but if those trucks are in the tunnel and the pollution from those trucks is simply coming back out over us, then we're not going to see an improvement to the air quality in the western part of Melbourne. We all know the west of Melbourne always bears the brunt of Melbourne's dirtiest industries. Like, all the toxic kind of chemical places are over this way. We used to have the Mobil refinery pumping out pollution. A lot of those fires that have popped up over the last few years, illegal dumping of chemicals in warehouses and stuff like that. So we kind of bear the brunt. Our air quality is not good enough now. So for the EPA to come out and say the tunnels aren't going to have any negative effect on us isn't good enough, because what we've got at the moment isn't good enough.
I must say, look, after we met, I went and did some independent reading, just to make sure, to satisfy myself. And I think the position I arrived at is, look, the EPA was technically, it seemed they were technically correct in what they were saying, is that having the tunnel isn't going to make it any worse. And that does seem a valid point, that it may concentrate it maybe in an area, but it is overall probably not going to make it worse. But the sad thing is, when the trucks and the cars are above ground, there literally is nothing you can do about it. But as soon as they go underground, it seems there's an opportunity to actually capture this and filter it and actually reduce what's going on in the West, and that to not do. I mean, so the EPA might be right; it's not going to be any worse. But what a missed opportunity to not actually try to make it better for the future.
Oh, absolutely. It's so rare that you get an opportunity, like you said, to actually do something about mobile sources of pollution, and this really will be a lost opportunity. The World Health Organization declared that diesel exhaust is a known carcinogen back in 2012, and they say there is no safe level of exposure to diesel exhaust.
Really?
And and unfortunately in Australia, our truck fleet, we've got the second oldest truck fleet out of all of the OECD countries. I think the average truck is 14.9 years old.
Really? What do you think's driving that? Just like purchase cost, or do we maintain them better, or?
What's driving, I think, is just the way that we move freight in Victoria. So the people, often the larger freight companies with sort of cleaner trucks that tend to take the loaded containers from the port out to the warehouses, but all those empty containers coming back, they're moved by little owner operators. So it's guys that just own one truck. They don't have a lot of money. They don't get paid much money for what they do. I think they might get paid $50 for a container run or something like that. So it's kind of like how we're set up here to move freight is kind of a bit of a broken system. It's a system that most other jurisdictions around the world have got rid of. Port of Long Beach in California, for example, they used to have a similar system to ours. They instigated a clean truck program and reduced their truck pollution by 90% in 3 years. And that got rid of the little owner operators. And for the first time, they were getting employed by companies. They had sick leave, they had holiday pay, they had decent modern trucks, and it was kind of a win-win for everybody. And that's really what we need here as well, something like that. But while we've got these dirty trucks, the opportunity is to filter the vent stacks. And, if the EPA, where's the precautionary principle? You would think they would be putting in now measures to protect our health if you're not quite sure, whereas they're saying now, let's just wait and see if it gets worse. If it gets worse, we might do something. And that was one of the things we were trying to get out of the EPA last night at this consultation process was, what are the actual triggers? What would make you put filtration in? And it's like, well, we'd need a year of data coming out of the monitors. We'd look at that, then we'd need to go away and try and work out where that pollution was coming from. Then if we worked out it was coming from the vent stacks, then we'd need to look at, well, can we mitigate it in another way? Like all that response last night just told me that, as much as the government says we're going to put filtration in if it's needed, I doubt whether it's just not clearly defined what those trigger points are.
Look, one thing to be fair to the politicians, and I spoke to two about this. I think they genuinely, that they're so busy. There is so much coming across their desk. They genuinely believe that they're doing the right thing because in fact, one of them quite frankly said, well, this is the EPA. Like, of course I have to trust what they're telling me. They don't have an agenda. So when they tell me something, I have to believe it to be true. And sometimes I think it depends on are you asking the right question? And so if you can reframe the problem and the question becomes, but what if we try to make it better? And look, I've had a few things lately where, I've had a politician very genuinely saying to me, look, I know this has been looked at really thoroughly and, they're not looking to shortcut things. But then when you go and dig a bit deeper, you realise kind of people pull the wool over their eyes. They tell them what they want to hear to get things through. And it's so hard when they have not enough time to do things properly that, of course, that happens. And it is, and sadly, human nature. But it's why people like you just need to keep banging the drum, because you have to push through and get them to listen when you know that it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Oh, look, I hear what you're saying. We have a lot of dialogue with politicians, and there's some great pollies out there. They're there for the right reasons. But yeah, it's really hard when you're up against that system, I think. That's the real challenge. But, the government's been coming out recently and saying filtration is in its infancy. And, that's gaslighting, Michael. The first filters that went on a tunnel vent stack happened in the 70s in Japan. Germany started putting filtration on vent stacks in 1993. It's not in its infancy. There's established businesses all over Europe and Asia who are putting filtration in. China does it, South Korea does it, Norway does it, the Netherlands do it. The list goes on and on. Japan does it. We need to be doing it here as well, because we're already an impacted community, it's not like we're any other community where, a tunnel might be going in, a community that has, relatively clean air like the rest of their city. Here we're already dealing with this, this legacy of dirty industries and dirty trucks. And the government hasn't got any programs in place that are making any difference to getting old trucks off our roads.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's another whole program, isn't it? Look, I think, Martin, we're coming to the end of the time. I've got a couple more people to get through. But can I just say, well, firstly, well done. The personal time you put into this is huge. Anyone who's prepared to give that time over a couple of decades to fight the good fight, hats off to you. But let's give people a takeaway. So first, I know your website for this is filterthestacks.com.au. That's filterthestacks.com.au. And what is it you'd like people to go there and do?
I would love people to go there, have a look at some of our information, learn a bit more about what's going on, and sign that petition. We really need to have this show of strength that there's people behind our campaigning. And it's only through that the strength of, the sheer numbers of people that governments will listen. Governments, it works on the squeaky wheel principle. I'm sure you've encountered this yourself, Michael.
For many years.
Whoever screams out the loudest tends to get listened to, and that's what we're trying to do with this campaign. And it's all about, it's the future for our kids. We don't want these stacks to be pumping out pollution for decades to come, just when we've just won the challenge to get trucks off our streets. The government just needs to go that next step, put filtration on. We would be building statues to their honour saying this is fantastic, but go the whole way. They keep being able to find money for these cost overruns on these projects. Just find the money to put filtration in there, and we can all celebrate this win together.
No, look, that sounds great. Look, thanks, Martin, for being on the show. And look, good luck with it. We might touch base in another few weeks, see how things are going, or maybe next month. But good luck, and we'll stay in touch, okay?
Great. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Martin. Cheers.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
That was Martin Wurt, the head of MTAG, the Maribyrnong Truck Action Group, who for 25 years, that community group has been fighting to get trucks off the road. The government has actually stepped up and is building the tunnel, which anyone who lives in the West is very aware of, but it's going to be fantastic when it's finished. It does just feel like, if it's not the icing on the cake, what they need is the filters on the stacks. There you go. That was Dad version of explaining it. And now it's 4:25. You're listening to Wyn FM, Westside Drive on 88.9.